Hi, my name is Faith Untold, and this story for this video, you might wonder why I'm telling it on this specific channel, and it won't seem obvious because this is not the normal kind of video that I post, but I think if you watch the whole video, you'll understand why. So, when I was younger, I always felt like I was called to write. Like, I loved writing stories, loved reading. Like, I'm a huge book nerd, if you know me at all, and I love watching TV shows and different things. But I always loved writing, like, especially when I was in school and I had this writing class, I had to write different paragraphs for. Like, sometimes I would write stories. Like, I remember that I wrote this one story about a doll that came to life. And I mean, it wasn't a creepy story or anything, though that sounds creepy now that, I'm older. Like, that premise sounds creepy, but it wasn't really. It's kind of like Toy Story, more. More like Toy Story, but with my own dolls that I already had. I also loved writing books with my best friend. Her name's Tara, and we wrote several stories together. Like, I would always, like, whenever she came over and we had a sleepover, we would always we'd get on my computer. Back then it was my parents' computer, and we just write our books or stories. Like, there was one, like, that we called The Mummy, which was kind of based off of, like, The Mummy movie with Brendan Fraser in it. And then there was this one where both of our characters, they lived like in France, and it was a mystery with talking cats. It was really interesting. But I had always felt called to write, and I'd written, like, we both wrote like a lot, but we were never able to really finish the stories or even get to the midpoint, which was kind of disheartening. But I think I'm starting to realize that maybe God hadn't meant for me to write yet, and that maybe I was just building up experience. So, for most of my teenager years and my childhood, I wrote a whole bunch of different stories, which I actually still have some of them backed up online or like on paper. But, like, as I said, I never finished any or like even got close, like, past the first 4 or 5 chapters or past even the outlining stage. And the more that time passed, like, the more disheartening it grew, and I was like, is this really what I'm called to do? But I really never actually doubted that. I never doubted that it was my calling, which is really insane. And I think it was for the best that I hadn't actually written and published an actual book yet. Because, I mean, I was still young. And second of all, I had this huge journey and growth in my faith during that whole entire period. I asked Jesus into my heart at a very young age, where I didn't really know exactly what it all entailed, but I knew what I was doing. But at the same time, I was still young, that I had not gotten a very firm foundation of my faith. And as I grew up, I kind of fell away from him got into a judge's cycle, which was really weird. And if you don't know what that is, basically judge's cycle means, like, you're really good with God, then like something happens and you fall away from him, and then he sends like another miracle and you come back to him and be pulled back to him. And really that's going to be your whole life, no matter what you do. If you believe in God, you're going to have ups and downs. Like, it's basically going to be a judge's cycle for your entire life, because we are sinners, we are not perfect. So no matter what we do, we're probably going to have that at least partially in our lives. Maybe not to a huge extent. Maybe it's not as big and crazy as Judges was, but to some degree we will have a Judges cycle throughout our life. It's just going to happen. It's just how it is. But I fell into this, like, really big depression because, like, I fell away from God. because I was sinning and I was doing it willfully. You never not sin and not know what you're doing. You just don't. You know in your mind, you have a conscience, you have a soul, so you automatically know, but you're choosing to go against it. And maybe it doesn't seem like that big of a deal at that point in time, but later on you realize, yes, I started to fall away from God at this point. And like, it got to a point where I fell so far that I didn't even know how to get back to God. The thing is, I couldn't get back to God on my own. It was Him. I had to just say, come and get me, Lord. I'm lost. And because of all those experiences, I think that's why He never really let me finish an actual book. And because of all that, that is how I wanted to, instead of just writing the books that I had been writing before, that had not really had much meaning behind them. They didn't really have a moral to the story or a theme or any meaning or purpose behind them. That all changed after all this time. And I wanted so much to write like the lessons I had learned and put my testimony into words through another person. Like, I wanted to share morals and stories that I have learned throughout the years in my experience, which may not be much, but it's surprisingly more than I thought I would at this point in life. But I want to put them on paper, and I think maybe that's the reason God's held me back from my writing. And I also procrastinated, so there is that. So now it is 2024. I am always going to struggle with God, but I think He's given me the okay to start ahead, and He has been for a little while, but I've just been putting off because I'm lazy and I'm a procrastinator and I don't really know how to write exactly. I mean, I do, but I'm not great at it. But thankfully, the Lord doesn't give us what we're qualified for. He qualifies the called, which is awesome. But so, like last year, I really got into the series called Remington Steele. Y'all might have seen it. Don't go watch it if you haven't. Like, it is not a very good TV show, but it gave me an idea for a great premise for a book that would be a very much cleaner, more betterly moral standards version. But God changed that idea and gave me another idea that was somewhat new to put a twist on that original premise that I thought. And that happens with a lot of stories, if you don't know. And that's kind of how the idea for Adelaide's Adventures started. And that's what I'm going to try writing this year.